Welcome to the Logistics Business Virtual Show. It's great to see you again. You join me at the first of our series of expert panels. We're running 10 of these through the week. And the theme of this panel is road transport challenges and looking at the solutions to those myriad challenges that I think the whole industry knows about and is tackling at the moment. I'm joined by experts from across the industry. It's not about giving you a formal sales pitch. It's not about death by PowerPoint. It's about having a discussion and maybe helping your decision making as you go through the months and years ahead. So only other thing to say is that please use the chat facility to ask our panel questions, and we'll be delighted to engage with you with those. So without further ado, I'll ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves. Shall I start with you first, Tom?
Yeah, good morning, Paul. Hi, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. My name is Tom Southall. I'm the Policy Director for the UK Cold Chain Federation. So we are a trade association representing businesses who operate temperature-controlled vehicles in the UK. So we've got keeps rising, but we've got something like 130 members operating either fleets or temperature control warehousing as well. And yeah, safe to say we've been supporting our members throughout some of the sort of uncertainty that's affected hauliers over the last couple of years.
Thanks, Tom. And Andrea.
Yeah, hello, good morning, everybody. Thanks for having us in this conversation. Well, I'm here in representation of Freight Forwarders Network Solutions, such a long name, who manages 3 logistics networks, Concur, the Cooperative, and Globalia. Concur is the oldest one. It has representation in 140 countries. Then we have the Cooperative, which has 300 members. And then we have Globalia, which has representation in 160 cities. The main difference I would say we have against other logistics networks is that we are, let's say we work in an exclusive basis, and also that we have a TMS available for our members, which is FreightViewer. I'm in charge of FreightViewer. We have a whole department developing this tool, and also we have all members ready to start using this tool, and we are there to offer our members a digital tool, a digital strategy to have a pace in Industry 4.0.
Thank you very much, Andrea. And Michel.
Yeah, so welcome everyone. Great to be here. My name is Michel Stekelenburg, Director Strategic Accounts EMEA at Project 44. Project 44 is the global leader in real-time transportation visibility. So what we do is we provide transparency on our clients' logistics processes. We do that for all modes of transport, including the more complex one, which is obviously road. And we do that globally across all continents. Yeah, we support our clients in trying to better mitigate, let's say, future disruptions, things like that. Yeah, we'd love to have a chat with the other panel members.
Fantastic. Okay, great to see you again, Michel. So let's get into this rather gloomy theme. There are a lot of challenges in road transport. I mean, I suppose we could do 2 things. We could either go through them all one by one, or we could get maybe talk about them as a group. But how about Tom, if I come to you first, do you want to summarize what the Federation believes are the biggest issues facing road transport stakeholders at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. It's well, where to start really, Paul.
Exactly, yeah.
There's a number that we could talk about. I think one perhaps that hopefully we're moving beyond is direct issues with the pandemic. So we had lots of issues over the last couple of years, obviously with keeping the nation's food moving, and drivers of our vehicles being key workers, and some of the challenges around that. Fingers crossed, at least in the UK, rightly or wrongly, you know, we've moved away from restrictions and things like that. So we're seeing less issues with drivers being off from work from COVID. The big one that's also faced us over the last year is around recruitment, and I think this is a global issue, but perhaps might be keenly more felt in the UK. We had a real challenge recruiting drivers throughout the last year, a real drop off in the number of available workers, people leaving the sector in quite large numbers. We struggled to train new drivers throughout the pandemic because the test centres were simply closed, and lots of other issues, including departure from the European Union, other things as well that really caused a huge drop off in driver numbers. We've seen a little bit of a recovery over the last couple of months, but we're still way below what we were sort of pre all of those issues. So that remains a real issue for companies trying to find drivers to support their operations. That goes much beyond drivers, I should say. You know, it's warehouse workers, it's lots of other workers in the food supply chain. But drivers is perhaps the one that obviously we're talking about today, and has had the most kind of visual kind of impact.
Can I just interrupt you? I don't want to cut you in your flow there, Tom, but while we're talking about drivers and you know, the problem has alleviated a bit, we hear lots of lurid stories about huge salaries being paid and drivers being recruited. Is the evidence of the Cold Chain Federation that that's been happening?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I don't think I said the problem had been alleviated. I think I said it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's my mistake. Yeah,
the situation's improved slightly. So we saw, huge wage increases for drivers. So businesses doing what they can to attract the sort of smaller pool of drivers and even lure them away from their competitors. That kind of happened across the board. So I guess good news for drivers in that sense that on average it's, you know, they're now receiving more pay. There's challenges around what that means for the business in sort of doing that. But the issue that we haven't perhaps got beyond is the retention problem. So we are managing to attract more people now into HGV driving and LGV driving, possibly partly because of those increased salaries, but we're still struggling to retain a lot of those drivers. So we see a high number of churn, particularly in younger drivers, which means that we've got a high number coming in. We're back to testing quite a lot, but lots of those are leaving. So we're still in quite a precarious position. So as an industry, particularly in the UK, but I think in other countries as well, we need to take a longer term view at how we can try and retain those drivers and stop that kind of high churn. Else we won't, we will still be on the cusp of another crisis like we had last year.
What do you think those solutions will be in the long term to alleviate the problem, to use that word I used before?
Yeah, it's challenging. There's certainly no easy solutions. There's a lot of interesting sort of surveys out there of drivers and what they see as the good and bad parts of the job, and things like how drivers are treated on the road, in rest facilities, even when they're visiting depots. Certainly scores highly as something drivers are not happy with. Businesses are having to learn to be a bit more flexible with kind of working conditions and shift patterns, and I think the pandemic has accelerated that. People, more family time and appreciating work-life balance perhaps a bit more, or understand changing their perspectives on life. So I think it's certainly beyond pay. Pay is important, but we've got to listen to the drivers themselves and what are some of those challenges, and it is looking at how they're treated on the road and trying to be a bit more flexible about sort of working patterns and things like that.
I want to talk about other challenges too, Tom, and I very much want to get your input. But whilst we're on this subject of driver shortages, I think there's been a tendency in some of the more strident areas of the British media to say it's only a UK problem, this issue of drivers. And I'd love to get Andrea and Michel's view, who are both European based but work for global businesses, and just to get a sense of how much driver shortage is an issue both in Europe and in their wider territory. So can I come to you first on that, Andrea? Is it just a UK only problem?
No, not at all. I think it is focused on the UK because in the UK there are other political issues that have this as a consequence as well. So it's everything focused there. But I don't think it's only in the UK. I think it's something that is happening in other countries. In the UK, as I said, the problem there is everywhere on the TV, and we can see it everywhere, but I don't think it's there, as I said. And I would like to say also that, of course, the issue can be covered by the salaries, having better salaries for the drivers. But then I would also like to say that has a consequence, let's say, in the customer, because this will increase the cost. So because this is a problem, a global problem, as I was saying before, I think we need to find a global solution. And I think the higher cost is something that is happening and that will happen in a short term. I don't think this will be improved in the long term. So as a global problem, a global solution, and as I was saying before, we should find a way to have a global solution with all the drivers in the sector, not only in the UK, because whatever happens in the UK with the shipment, that shipment or that cargo will go somewhere, and that somewhere will mean, for example, demurrage, detention, all those fees will put up the price for the customers. So it's a global problem in the UK. It might start in the UK, but it's a global problem for all the actors in the supply chain, and the consequence goes directly in the client, definitely.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. And Michel, would you like to input something on this?
Yeah, so I also recognize this challenge, right? So most of our clients are experiencing these driver shortages as well. What we see in the industry is that there's a higher demand, and clients are more and more asking us, can you help us becoming more efficient? Are there any ways where your technology can contribute to creating a more sustainable, more efficient supply chain? And for example, when focusing on driver shortages, they are in high need to see, can we start improve collaboration across the chain with other carriers, for example, because you know in today's world, it's still a big challenge, a big problem, I would say, that many trucks are driving back empty, for example. So why are they still doing that, right? Why do we still have such a huge amount of empty miles? And that's something where we are working on and looking into. We offer our clients the ability to use our shared visibility module. And basically what it does, it utilizes the network of carriers which is connected to our platform. And every carrier which approves that they want to share capacity, they can collaborate with all the other carriers within our network. So they can exactly see, but also shippers who are using our application, you know, I need to move some goods from A to B, which of the carriers part of the Product 44 network are actually on that route, right? So yeah, it is a demand we're getting from all clients across all industry verticals. Very recognizable. I don't see this as being a UK problem. I think it's a global issue. I truly believe that technology can minimize that issue, but yeah, as mentioned by Tom, for example, the churn in drivers, for example, doesn't help, and unfortunately technology also won't be able to cover that and to resolve that, but for sure technology can at least create a more sustainable supply chain, improve efficiency there. Yeah,
we'll come back. It's good to hear, and we will come back onto that, Michel. And I want to get you to talk in more detail later on about the solutions that you provide. But let's just talk about come back to these challenges and difficulties that companies have to face. So coming back to you, Tom, you know, we're talking about driver shortages. We've seen that's an issue in UK, Europe, across the world. It seems like if it's not already a big issue, fuel prices is going to be an even bigger issue due to, you know, dreadful world events. What's your view on that?
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. Quite sort of startling increases, I think, both for us as consumers, you know, when we're filling up cars and things like that every day, it seems to increase further. And obviously those impacts are keenly felt by businesses in the logistics space as well. So yeah, it's a significant issue, and quite a difficult one, I think, for sort of governments to address, because you know the causes are so, you know, worldwide and geopolitical. So trying to look for solutions for that is a challenge. In the UK, we've actually got an additional issue for operator temperature controlled vehicles when it comes to fuel, in that at the end of this month, we lose the entitlement to use rebated diesel, or red diesel as it's called, in transport refrigeration units. So those are the fridges that sit on the side of trailers and keep products chilled and frozen. So that's another kind of cost increase. So it's a huge challenge. It's one of the many reasons that pricing is going up, and that the cost for operators and then for consumers as well is increasing. What we're seeing, and you know, Michel's absolutely right. It's making businesses look at more, you know, what they can do to be more efficient, and empty running is a big part of that. But linking on as well to the sort of wider sustainability challenge that I think businesses are starting to face. You know, in the UK, we've got an increasing number of zones where where diesel vehicles can't travel. We've had the first zero emission zone, I think, just opened in Oxford, but restrictions in quite a lot of our major cities as well. Questions around future kind of road pricing and perhaps increased taxation for those using diesel. So it's a huge issue right now, and it links to that bigger sort of wider picture of how businesses can try and think about some of those big challenges coming down the road when it comes to the sort of sustainability agenda as well.
Which, just before I get Andrea and Michel to talk about that same issue in across the channel, you know, what's your view on the whether the infrastructure is likely to be in place to support, for example, electric HGVs? I mean, I suppose the first question is the technology there for heavy goods vehicles to be powered by battery ultimately with enough power? And secondly, is the infrastructure in place? And if not, when is it likely to be?
Yeah, good question. Well, I think on the larger scale, so the HGV side, the answer is probably no to both of those. Being a bit more positive at the smaller end, so small goods vehicles, particularly those operating in urban areas, electric and battery is definitely becoming quite widespread in cities like London, where the range anxiety is not too much of an issue and they can return and charge. So there are some positives in there, but I think HGVs and the bigger Arctics remain the kind of the wider challenge. There's a lot of technology and kind of trials and things that look promising. There's that big debate around, is it electric, is it hydrogen fuel cell? And depending who you talk to, you can get a very different kind of opinion. But I think whoever you speak to, we're many years away. I think I always get my dates wrong, but the government has mandated for the end of HGV diesel, I think it's 2040, correct me if I'm wrong. So at least, we have a bit of a target, but it's going to be a real challenge for that technology to develop and of course become widespread and then be backed up by the required infrastructure, which certainly isn't there at the moment. Just to be a bit more positive on another note, our particular interest is around temperature control and talking about that fridge again, which at the moment is a primarily diesel based. So on those big Arctics, that fridge will have a secondary diesel engine. The outlook looks quite positive for transition away for diesel on those units. And actually, if you take away the HGV and just concentrate on the trailer, there are technologies coming through where you've essentially got an electric trailer, so a battery which is either topped up by solar panels on the roof or harnessing the energy from the axles to make that trailer zero emission essentially. There's some issues with the refrigerants actually, but certainly to transition away from diesel. And that's something that we see is possible within a much shorter time scale than HGVs, but we have the same issues around they will still require charging at depots, and we still need to think about how the infrastructure will work around those, but some positivity around temperature control trailers at least.
Also your members, because you specifically you're representing a very specific sector in cold chain. With the growth of all these ULEZ zones, your members can't go in small electric vans to avoid paying those prices. So what advice can you give them? Is it just a case they have to suck up these charges until such time as the technology that you've talked about can help them?
Yeah, I mean, the vast majority of the network, so those bigger trucks don't really go into urban centres. So that's kind of one thing, is that they tend to, it's hard to drive a sort of 44-ton Arctic truck around Oxford, for example. Yeah. So those bigger trucks, at least at the moment, are less impacted by some of those restrictions, but they are growing all the time. So particularly around London, that might change. For those that need to do kind of urban deliveries, we do have members that operate electric-only fleets of smaller vehicles. For kind of deliveries and last mile. So it tends to be small trucks going in. But there are certainly some businesses that it is just another cost that they're having to absorb, because of course the capital upfront cost, if you like, of investing in an electric fleet or some of the options to reduce your reliance on diesel are quite expensive. And I think we've got a bit of a challenge around supporting particularly small and medium businesses to look at how they might finance some of those changes. I think that's going to be a real challenge.
Thanks, Tom. We'll come back to you in a second. So let's Let's throw this question out to the wider world with Andrea and with Michel. The issues that Tom's addressed in the UK in terms of infrastructure and charging zones, and you know, the growth of electric. What's your response? How do you think Europe is looking? Is it ahead of the UK in this area? Let's start with you, Andrea.
Yeah, again, I think it's a European and, let's say, global problem. For example, for charging electric vans, electric lorries, or electric trucks, I think it's quite difficult to have that now, because maybe you have to go out the route you have planned and to charge your truck, charge your vehicle. So that is impossible. Well, not impossible, but it's like more time for the driver, and it's also more time for the shipment to arrive to the final destination. So that is quite difficult. Or I would say that, as Tom was saying, I don't think it's a short-term alternative for the transport, for the land transport, because there's still a lot to do on that. And I think we need to get to know more about that in the way that we should say, okay, we can use the electric transport, but we need to make it possible for the transportation of the goods, or even for the companies. Another thing that I would say is that all these problems that are coming up are increasing the costs, as I was saying before, and I don't think that in short term that will improve. I mean, salaries need to go up, so that will mean less profit for the company. Also, if we do invest in electric equipment, we do need to invest, so that's again a bit more higher cost. So all that needs to be, I would say, not mitigated but compensated to the client. I say, okay, for my client, I'm going to put the price up. Yes, I will. I need to, because my costs are getting higher, but I will give you something else. Maybe I can give you an instant quote, because I can do it by transport management software, for example. I can calculate the cost easily. Or even more, I can give you several options, because clients love options. So we always need to give several options. So all these problems that are global, as I said before, and if are not affecting the rest of the countries now, will affect. I mean, the fuel costs, that is something that we are all suffering, not only in the transport, in the ocean and in the air freight, it is the same. So all those issues that are going to be in the near future, and we are suffering now, need to be, I would say, compensated to the final client, giving something else. Those problems are not going to disappear, so let's give them something else. And as I was saying before, I do insist in that, as a person that, or as a company that works with many other companies worldwide, they all have the same problems. The same issues are in all the freight forwarding companies, even though they don't work, or well, all of them will work with land transport, but even in the air freight, or companies specialized in the air freight, are in the same issues, and also in the ocean freight.
And it'd be good to get a view, because I know you're a global company, but you're based in Spain.
Yeah.
What does Spain, you know, I don't know, does Spain have diesel zones in cities where vehicles can't travel? Does it have a wide charging infrastructure for electric vehicles on the roads of Spain?
Well, they are getting there. It's not wide at all, I wouldn't say. I would say that only small vehicles would be used to transport goods with electric vehicles. And then there were some zones in Madrid, but they are getting rid of them. It was like in London, it was exactly the same. There was some timings for getting in the city, and some parts where diesel vehicles couldn't go in. So yeah, that was their last, I think it was 2 years ago, but now it's out again, because well, they changed government. So it was back in normal circulation, let's say. What I think the issue is here is that, okay, we do take measurements, or we do say create zones for different vehicles, but we don't really help. And Tom, I think you could say this much better than I can. You don't really help the company that has to do that. What does the government, or what does the politic do to help the company to I don't know, you can't go in London in certain parts, but how can I help you? I demand this, but I don't really help you on that task. And it's not a matter of only the improving the emissions, but also we will need those transports in the cities. So I don't think there is a solution to put all that let's say weight on the companies, on the transport companies. I don't think that's the solution, because companies won't be able to afford all these changes. And I think that's the reason why Madrid
You need government intervention, you're saying.
That's it, yeah, I would say that, yeah.
Thank you for that, Andrea. Michel, what's your view on this? We were talking about fuel prices, and it's very much linked to the drive towards sustainability. What's your view?
Yeah, so I'm based in Rotterdam, the Netherlands. I think we are quite sophisticated when it comes down to the network and infrastructure for charging cars, for example, electrical vehicles. You know, I see a lot of initiatives in Europe, but also more specifically within the Benelux and in the Netherlands, where more and more companies are trying to figure out, okay, how can I create a more sustainable environment? So how can I reduce carbon emission and adhere to regulations? Because we do have that cities where, you know, the larger trucks are just banned to get into the center, for example. It is a difficult topic. So I do agree that I think governments should also come up with a plan to support these shippers, these forwarders, because, you know, they already are tight on margins, and you know, how are they going to charge it back to the client? What we see here is that, and also our clients actually, but predominantly these are the shippers. Shippers who are having their own fleets, they are slowly transitioning their fleet. So they're replacing their fleet by electrical vehicles. But also what we see is that the whole infrastructure around these cities are changing, right? So you see more, let's say, urban hubs being created. Companies like Picnic is maybe a good example. They have like different hubs just around let's say the city, the center urban cities, and they use electrical vehicles to deliver all their orders to the home addresses, basically, so final mile delivery. So I think if you look at it from a more urban point of view, there are loads of initiatives to see, okay, these big trucks are being banned. We need to create a more sustainable environment. So, you know, how can we get there? But I think it really depends on, you know, long, you know, if we're talking about shipments which are having long transit times, which are crossing borders, it is a totally different topic. I think for final mile, it is very doable. There are a lot of initiatives. Another thing, what I'm seeing is I'm in contact with a company called Hard Hyperloop. And that is also exciting because they basically are looking into, you know, other modes, future modes of transport. Why not use, you know, underground tubes, for example, high pressure tubes to start moving goods. And another thing we see is that also clients are looking into ways, you know, can I use rail more often instead of road, for example. From a technology point of view, last thing I want to mention about that is what we do at Project 44 is, and that is more tied to sustainability, is that we provide also visibility on carbon emissions. So we provide GLAC certified carbon emission data to support these companies to get more insights on, you know, what does my carbon footprint look like from a transportation point of view.
Sure. Coming back to we're going to talk in detail in a minute about some of these ways companies can use digital solutions, but I want to come back to some more challenges. And I think another key one is trade frictions. We've seen what Brexit has done. I still don't think we've seen all the fallout of that yet, by quite a long way, but it keeps being interrupted by other sort of huge, colossal world events. But trade frictions are not just an issue for the British; they also are for European companies as well. Tom, can I get a view from you on that, on how the road logistics industry can deal with these frictions?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the sort of fallout from Brexit has been a big challenge, and I think there's a few ways you can look at it. You can look at it from the trade perspective, from the haulier perspective, or from us as consumers as well. I guess for our members as kind of hauliers, it's been more about kind of delays. So at various points when we've reached certain critical points in the end of the Brexit transition period and things like that, big queues forming at the short straits crossings, and that decision about whether they attempt to make that journey or whether they don't. And obviously the increased costs from lots of the new requirements for paperwork and checks and things like that. Often that falls on the sort of the product owner, I guess, so manufacturers and things like that. And I think looking at kind of UK business, it's currently UK exporters, particularly food and drink products, that have been hit particularly hard because the cost of those of exporting and the time taken has all increased massively, and particularly those involved in groupage, so small consignments going over to Europe. Now, if you put 10 different types of animal product on a lorry, they all need to be checked, they all need to have vet certification, so there's a huge amount of process. So that's clearly had a big impact, and overall, our trade with the EU is down kind of considerably from pre-Brexit. But I'm not sure we've seen the kind of worst of it yet as sort of consumers, because most of the checks are on the export side. We started introducing checks on products coming in from the European Union on trucks in January, so some sort of basic vehicle registrations and sort of customs registrations. But as it stands, from July, we'll start introducing more detailed checks on things like meat, dairy, fruit and vegetables that are coming into the UK. Animals of product origin will require that certification, and that all adds cost and delay. And it's largely the European companies bringing that product in who are going to be hit with those. So we're certainly concerned about what impact that will have on imports coming into the UK, and we rely heavily for things like fruit and vegetables and other products on European for that sort of those products. So there's some real questions to be asked, but it still remains in the air. One thing that I think has not necessarily helped there's been a lot of delays, so date shifting, and that's caused issues with planning workforce and things like that. And there are rumours starting that some of those checks coming in from July on products coming into the UK may well be either delayed or pushed further away, and that creates uncertainty. But yeah, the real questions perhaps are whether European hauliers will still want to come into the UK when those checks come in, and what impact that will have on food for us as consumers. Because yeah, we do have members involved in taking vehicles over and delivering into Europe and coming back, but the majority of our products that come into the UK from Europe are on European registered trucks coming in and going out every day.
And of course, as cold chain, you're right at the heart of this long-standing and very debilitating Northern Ireland protocol issue. What's the Cold Chain Federation's view on where that needs to go to get sorted?
Well, I think it's I'm not sure we've got a solution for how to sort it.
If you could answer that, you'd be I can understand. Yeah,
exactly. But yeah, I mean, what we're seeing is it's very, very difficult for businesses between Northern Ireland and mainland GB to trade, because essentially Northern Ireland remains in their single customs unit. So we're seeing a real shift to trade going through the Republic of Ireland, either from Europe and bypassing the UK altogether, or there is still things making it across. But again, those small exports and imports have been hit. There are some temporary measures in place to make it easier for example, businesses supplying supermarkets in Northern Ireland, making it a bit easier for them to transport goods across, but they still remain temporary, and there's still ongoing talks between the UK and the EU that basically at loggerheads for the long-term solution to that. So
is the delay and uncertainty, though, are your members telling you that it's threatening their existences as businesses?
We don't represent sort of manufacturers, so we are just on logistics.
Sure.
So no, I think that kind of trade was a smaller part of some businesses. Those that it's a larger part have perhaps either got used to the new rules, certainly involving extra cost and time. So things can't be ordered and delivered the next day anymore. It's taking more time. Perhaps looking at alternative routes that are available. So I mean, logistics businesses will always find a way. Logistics is about solving challenges, and our members and logistics business across the world have proved over the last couple of years that, you know, they can step up and still deliver incredible service in the face of all sorts of challenges.
Yeah.
So we can still do these things, but what it's meaning is that costs are going up and up, and that's having real impacts on consumers and inflation. And in the UK, I think that's a really difficult conversation, because we can't see, if you look wider into, you know, food supply, that pressure on inflation and cost rises getting any better. And in fact, you know, it's still increasingly getting more challenging.
Yeah, and speaking of, you know, answering those challenges, I think we know it's accepted that digital solutions, whether it's in addressing trade frictions or whether it's the other issues we've talked about, are very much being addressed with the help of digital solutions. So let's give Andrea and Michel a chance to talk about what they can do for road transport customers. So Andrea, tell us about, for example, FreightViewer, and other solutions of Concur Network that can help address some of these problems.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, first of all, I think having or belonging to a network is quite important for, especially who we work with, which is small to medium-sized companies, to have a partner at the other destination or origin point where you are working, and having that partner that, you know, that is being like tested when they come in the network. They are all tested. Having a reliable partner who you work with is essential for this, because you need to know who is picking up those goods you are sending. You don't want any more unpredicted problems. We've got enough with everything that's going on, so that's important. And also in terms of digitization, well, FreightViewer is more focused in providing a good service to your client, and giving, let's say, I'd like to say instant quotes, but it's difficult to give an instant quote to customers, because well, everything can change from 1 hour to the other in terms of rates. So giving those services, those instant services, or at least what the customer is used to, because it's kind of funny the way that in logistics, as well, all the people that work in logistics, we are used to have everything online, instant. We go to Amazon, or we are used to have everything like 24 hours later, then we order it. But then when it comes to logistics, when you are a person working in logistics, you have to say, no, you have to wait, because it's almost impossible to give that, to give all this at instant. So in the transport rates, for example, well, in FreightViewer, you can upload your rate and then offer them. But what we find in transport is that well, different companies give the rate depending on the kilometers, depending on the distance. So maybe harmonizing all that in one single system will help the freight forwarder to give these instant rates. And for that, you need digital tools such as, well, for example, FreightViewer, where you can manage all the information. Because another big issue I can find in the transport and in the shipping industry is the amount of information we have to manage, from documentation, from rates, from everything. You need to manage a lot of information. So putting all that in one single platform at least gives you some, well, the tool to work in a very quick way to give an answer to your client who is waiting like for 5 minutes, no more than that. So relying on digital tools, I think it's more of cutting some costs. For example, you can have a website where you can offer your rates, and you don't have to have your team selling those rates. The internet would do it for you. Then you can be with your client as long as you need. And then it's saving time, and time is money, I think, in this business. So having everything in one single platform helps the transport company, or the freight forwarder in this case, to have less time in providing that quote, to have more time to listen to your clients, to have more time to solve those trade problems that everybody has and have been so, well, they're getting bigger with the COVID, with everything that is happening. So I think it's more of reducing time, and also that time will reduce costs, obviously. The other issues, I think, as I said before, is something that we need to go for them and solve them. As Tom said, we will solve them. But the question is, what will the impact be in our clients and also in our profits? So if I want to put the price up and my profits need to be high, I need to compensate, as I was saying, with something, a website, a good service, a nice PDF with your cost, small things that the client would say, okay, I have a higher cost, but I have something else different from the other company that is giving me a cost in another way, or needs 2-3 days to give me that cost.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. And Michel, Project 44, a major player in the field of visibility, transport visibility, and that's the key thing, isn't it, going forward? Tell us about some of the solutions that you think can help address these important challenges that the road industry faces.
Yeah, I think first of all, we all know that specifically the road domain, the road transport industry is very conservative. So, you know, if we talk to our clients and quite large operators actually, and see how inefficient their processes still are. They are still doing a lot of manual work, using Excel to consolidate information. They don't use like smart technologies like AI, machine learning. So there's a lot to gain, I would say, in an essence. And Project 44 really tried to close that gap. So we support these carriers, the logistics service providers to, and it's quite in sync with what Andrea mentioned, to further optimize their processes, right? Because we talked about electric vehicles and things like that. Well, you need to have budget. You need to have room for improvement. There is room for improvement. Let me correct my wording, but you know, it all ties down to cost. And how can P44 support them? You know, if we can make sure that they automate their processes, right? That they become way more proactive, because now it is not like, you know, they hear about late deliveries or, you know, any delays in the ETA at a late stage, but they know at the most earliest stage possible, there will be a delay and they can better interact with their clients. Things we do as well to create more efficiency within the chain, for example, is that we provide tracking links or even portals for the carriers or logistics service providers clients, so they can track their own shipments, right? So if you look at the current market, if you see how many emails are being sent and calling, and you know, it's really old school, and we automate that whole process by workflow management, by making sure that automated messages will be sent to the end client on the status of their shipment, if there's an alert on a predictive delay in the ETA, for example. So reducing inefficiencies at customer service, for example, is a massive thing. Another thing to take into account, again, tying back to making an organization more cost efficient. If you realize that the larger LSPs, they are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars on late deliveries, for example, penalties, but also costs for detention and demurrage. And typically when we sit down with these clients and we ask them, you know, how is that? Mostly they just don't have the data, right? There's just a lack of data. So they know they can, that there's ways to improve that. They know they can reorganize their supply chain to mitigate risk for penalties, for example, or, you know, reduce costs for D&D, detention and demurrage, but they just don't have access to reliable data. And, you know, what we do is we connect to the carriers real time. So we provide that real-time data. We put smart value on top of that by using, you know, historical data, traffic information, roadworks, weather forecasting information, everything you can imagine. And that's being fueled into our machine learning and AI algorithms to predict the most accurate ETA. And if there's something which typically carriers are not very strong in, it is, you know, they can tell you when the shipment departures, but providing proactive updates on the ETA is something they typically are not very strong on. But yeah, I think, you know, in essence, it's all ties down to making sure that technology contributes to increasing significantly efficiency, making sure, as Andrea mentioned, also that, you know, the operational teams at those carriers and LSPs are not continuously firefighting. You know, they automate that process and they basically release time to create an improved relation with their clients, to sit down with their end clients to see, you know, how can we together work towards creating this more sustainable supply chain? And I think, I truly believe that it all starts by having access to reliable data.
Sure. I mean, just to follow up on that, is it hard in the circumstances to quantify return on investment for your customers on all these solutions, or is it something that you can actually do in a concrete way?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there are many value buckets, right? And some are more tangible, some are more measurable. But for example, a very simple calculation sum we typically do is we ask our clients, how many people have you got, how many FTE are actively running the customer service department? And we know by experience, by benchmarking, what is a typical percentage of increase of efficiency we can realize at customer service. So this is an easy calculation point. For example, we ask our clients, how much are you paying annually for late delivery penalties, detention, demurrage? And again, we've got like huge amounts of use cases for similar clients. So we have those use cases to tell these clients, expect a range of 20 to 40% of reduction. So, we can come up with these use cases and support them in building the business case, which is not just based on, hey, I want to exceed or increase customer experience or NPS score. That's maybe a little bit more measurable, but they want to see the numbers, right? So what is the investment? How fast can I get my return on investment? What is the time to value? But the answer is yes. So you can make it pretty concrete in terms of a dollar or euro or pound number. Yeah.
Okay, well, look, we're pretty much out of time, but I do want to just give Andrea a chance very briefly, perhaps, Andrea, anything you want to add to Michel's words there about customers who may have worries about return on investment?
Yeah, totally agree with Michel. One of the things that we always say, and one of the biggest issues of freight forwarders and where they lose a lot of time is in spot quotes, where as a client, we all compare. When you want to buy something, you always compare. So customers, freight forwarders, customers do the same. And the thing is that if you go for a quote to a company, to a freight forwarder, and they need, let's say, 20 minutes to give you an accurate quote, half an hour, that's some time they are losing. And sometimes that doesn't finish, it doesn't end up in a real shipment, in real earning money. So if we can only transfer or calculate how the time we spend on those spot quotes, and we put it on land, and we say, okay, you can have the website, which we offer in FreightViewer. You can check there whatever you need, whatever you want, but you don't have me on the computer doing or calculating those spot quotes. That half an hour from that person you have in your company, which is, I don't know, €9 the hour or 10 euros per hour. That is money along the month, and it's countable money that you can calculate. And that money that job you transfer on the internet online is something you do save, because we won't have the customers requesting one quote. They will compare and they will do it. So that is something that's not going to change. Let's turn it around and give something that I can make my customer happy, but not losing my time and money, definitely.
Well, thank you, Andrea. Sorry, will you say something, Michel?
Yeah, maybe one last comment on that. Another angle is fuel consumption, for example. We try to measure fuel consumption as well, and use the data to see and look into idle time, dwell time. Why is that so excessive? And if you can reduce that, and you also have insights on fuel consumption, which we are trying to do more and more, you can also look into how can I support these organizations to reduce fuel costs in general, right? Which is, again, you can put a number to that.
You certainly can. It'll be a big one, yeah. Okay, well, look, on that note, I think we can agree from hearing from our panelists that if anything, if you're a member of the road transport industry, you can see that these problems you've been having, you're certainly not alone. You're sharing them with other stakeholders all over the world. So there are ways out of this, as our digital solution contributors have said. So please do keep your questions coming. And please do contact us at Logistics Business if there's anything more you'd like to know about this system. And Other than that, thank our panelists, and do please bear in mind there are going to be 9 more panels on the show this week, so do attend those if you feel they're relevant to your line of business. And so thanks very much to Michel, to Tom, and to Andrea, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.